Hey guys, welcome to this victory edition of the Cover One Buffalo post-game show. I'm your host as always, Aaron Quinn, and with me tonight for the first time ever, lucky guy to come on when the Bills don't get beat up pretty bad. Maybe it's our lucky charm here at Cover One. Greg Tompsett, how you doing tonight, my man?
I don't know how you could be doing any better. It's obviously I am the lucky charm, but no, it's unbelievable. The range from where the expectation was to how the game actually went. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, totally. And like I said, yeah, you are a very lucky guy to be coming on for your first show and it being a victory show. I thought going into today that this is going to be a really difficult show to get yourself up for. I've been part of many post-game shows now, and a good amount of those have been blowouts or just really bad losses. Those are hard to get up for, man. This is going to be an easy show for me, man. I feel like we're playing with house money here. It's one of those opportunities where you're at the casino. Nobody expects you to win. You win big, and you're playing with house money. We got to win. Everybody, almost universally, I can't think of a single person that was really sold on the Bills coming out with a win, especially a dominant win like this in Minnesota against the Super Bowl contender. So this is house money, man. Don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I was trying to temper some of the talk, after you see first two rough weeks. Oh, we're going to be 0-16. This is the worst team in history. I was trying to temper that. Hey, there's some changes in the schedule coming up. It's going to be rough. It's actually not unlikely we might go 0-4, but it's not going to be an 0-16 team. We got plenty of good things coming up. Getting a win like today is unbelievable. Like I said, it's just found money. Just being able to take it to arguably the best roster in the NFL in their building, coming off the start that we had. It's as shocking as possible. We'll get into it later, but there was some history made from a underdog and betting standpoint that is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it is remarkable. And we'll get right into this, guys. This is going to be a fun show, and I can see the chat box is already getting fired up over here. So before we get into it, as always, I just want to let you guys know, I know the guys are working super hard. I saw them in the Slack channel over on the cover1.net. They're working really hard to get a bunch of content out for you guys. Obviously, everyone's really excited about this game. Eric and the crew were putting out a ton of great content leading up. So for next week, make sure that you get ready because we're always putting out content before and after the game. Cover1.net is the place to be. Go ahead and head over there, sign up for the premium membership. Greg has been a premium member for a while now. I know he enjoys it. I enjoy the Slack channel and all the premium content as well. I had to go on the radio and do a radio spot the other day, and I said, you know what, I just need to study up real quick. And I went through all the guys, everything they wrote, going ready for the game, and it helped me a ton. So make sure you head over to cover1.net and follow us over there. Download the app on your iOS, Android device, and the content comes right to you. And just make sure that you're following us and getting all the content. So we'll get into a little bit more of the business side later. I'm too excited to talk about that stuff. Today, obviously, the defense from Minnesota talked about all week. I think anyone that watched what they've done the first 2 weeks and watched what the Bills have done the first 2 weeks thought that this collision of a very talented unit, a very disciplined unit versus not so talented unit lacking a lot of discipline. When we figured that this collision happened, it was not going to go well for the Bills. And actually the opposite happened, right? Right out of the gates, the Bills, with a little bit of help from penalties, came out and put a good drive together and got on the board first, something we haven't seen this year. They're not a fast starting team. What do you think that first offensive series, obviously our defense did a great job this game, but what do you think that first offensive series really established for the Bills and their confidence in this game?
I thought that it really touched on a lot of important points. It was able to use some of my Minnesota's aggression and their assumption of dominance against them, having two screens in that first drive, being able to kind of mix it up a little bit. We did get a fortunate flag or two there, which, they happened, and that's part of the game. But being able to kind of use that against themselves, and then the rhythm that Elam showed, it was remarkable, the step up and the progression that he took, showing it right off the bat, being able to go through and he showed that nice touch pass on the swing pass to Ivory for a first down, a couple great scrambles, and then the dive, the entire show from a skill set standpoint and from what he had to offer was so different from what we had saw before, and really a nice step up in progression. So I actually thought a lot of that was on Dable to have a great game plan to put him in a good position to succeed. And obviously a lot more came down the line, but that first drive had so many positive elements from what we needed to see.
Yeah, no, I thought the game planning was excellent. Obviously, those scripted plays came out and they really attacked, like you said, the aggressiveness of what Minnesota was trying to do. Minnesota was begging them to throw, and they found those spots and threw. I thought some of the things that I needed to see from Allen after not a poor performance the week before, he had some ups and downs the week before. But I needed to see him have a little bit more composure in the pocket, not take too long to get rid of the ball, either dump it off or run with it type of thing, not just sit back there and hope something opens up. And that's what I saw really on that first drive was he was taking the screen pass or the swing passes, taking what the defense gave him. He seemed really calm, cool, collect. And when he had to take the ball and run, he did it. All those things to me were a sign that game speed is coming along a little bit. Obviously, I want to see the numbers, how he held onto the ball, because there was some of that still throughout the game of holding onto the ball all along. But I think that game speed's coming to him and that composure is coming to him. I mean, talk about a tough situation for a guy in his second start in the league, small school guy, didn't play big high school football, didn't play against a ton of great competition throughout college or with good competition. And he goes into a Super Bowl contender, a 17-point underdog in a brand new stadium that's constantly you hear about how it's rocking. And they come out and they put together a nice drive and he looked composed throughout. And for me, that was another, he just continues to hit these check marks for me on what I need to see out of a rookie quarterback. So I thought that part of his game was huge. What do you think on his composure, not necessarily the play, how he was able to remain composed and lead this team into a hostile environment?
Absolutely. I think that the lack of panic, I think that you were concerned about what is he going to do? Is there going to be that shell shock moment where, the Minnesota rushers come? And you mentioned the previous talent that he had seen. I mean, honestly, today was probably 7 or 8 of the 11 best defenders he's ever faced in his life. All today. So being able to face that kind of pressure and that kind of just onslaught of what that can do to a rookie quarterback, and you've seen it happen. If all of a sudden things go and start to unravel and you see that go down the rabbit hole, and all of a sudden it's compounded. You have the snowball effect. So instead, today, I think he built on that. He got them back on their heels a little bit. In the chat, Ryan Stokes was asking about, that his play versus Baker. And I can't lie, after Thursday night's game, I had a lot of that. Man, I'd love to see him throw on rhythm like that. I'd love to see him, to have those swing passes, know when to pull it back and keep it on a read, know when to take it over and to pull it down and get us that 7 yards on 3rd and 5. And he checked every single box today. He was on rhythm. He was on time. He kept it on a couple reads to at least give them the threat that, hey, I can pick this up too. I don't know that I want to see him hurdling defenders again. It was awesome. Just don't ever do that again. But yeah, the idea of that play, and I know Ryan LaSalle and Chris Brown were talking about how unbelievably crazy the sideline went. And when you see your franchise quarterback hurdle an all-pro defender on 3rd and 11 to pick up 12 yards, and that you see him go out there and do that, and he's laying it on the line physically like that, that's the kind of thing that builds serious camaraderie and serious buy-in to hey, this is our guy. I can get behind that.
Yeah, and I think all those things kind of are encompassed under that competitive toughness, mental toughness scope when people are evaluating players. And to me, I thought he always had it, and it was one of my reasons why it's okay for this kid to start early, because I don't think he's going to be shaken as far as the mental side of the game. And I think that competitive toughness along with the mental side of it is going to really go a long way for this kid's career. I don't think that a lot is going to shake him or ruin him. Like you said, I don't really want to see him hurdling all pro defenders that often, but the ability, when he laid out for that touchdown run, for him to just go full bore and lay out for that's impressive. It shows me the competitive toughness. One thing I want to talk about, though, because obviously there's a lot of good to come and talk about, but even, on the games where there's a lot of bad, I like to find the good. We had a lot of good in this game. One thing that I was very frustrated with, and I'm sure Josh Allen was frustrated with, he didn't let it get to him in this game. But early on, he had a couple nice passes. I even thought his first pass to Kelvin Benjamin was a nice pass that Benjamin should have really come down with. He should have fought for. There's a couple throws to Benjamin they didn't come up with. Robert Foster, he had that nice deep ball later on in the game, hit Robert Foster right in the hands in stride. You got to bring those in. I mean, his stats were still, 15 to 22, 196 yards. He had a passer rating of 111. Could have been a better day for him. I thought it was good on him to not get frustrated with those guys and lose any composure because guys weren't helping him along the process. But How frustrated are you in this wide receiving core when your quarterback's playing like that and not making these crazy throws that you expect from him, and he's on the money, but nobody's really helping him out? Not that nobody's helping him out, but people aren't helping him out.
No, that's been a huge theme in the chat so far. Wubba eyeballed everybody talking about what he's doing with the limited weapons. His stat line's, obviously by far 15 to 22, 196, like you said, that's the best stat line he's put up so far, efficiency wise. He probably had one or two balls that could have been picked. It was unfortunate. One of the receivers turned into a defender on one of them, but that easily you get that catch by Foster, you get the touchdown from Benjamin, you get that other throw. All of a sudden you're talking about, 18 of 22 for almost 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. That could have been an amazing game. So I thought that what he did within himself, having that kind of blank slate restart mindset to be able to not let the rough plays get to him, be able to give yourself a shot to be ready for the next play. Don't let it get down on you. That's a great mindset in good times and bad. That's great to have, when you throw an almost pick. That's also great to have, to not get yourself overconfident or too much. He didn't start pushing you at getting on they scored on their first 4 straight drives, didn't punt until late in the second quarter. He didn't all of a sudden get over his head and start trying to throw it and pick up, aggressive bombs. I don't remember him ever testing Harrison Smith, which is genius to never, he didn't try to go after Xavier Rhodes. He didn't try to put people into bad situations. Again, I take a lot of this back, and I'm assuming, but I'm giving a lot of credit to Dable. He put him in a great position to succeed. He made sure he had reasonable reads that were quick and available. And then Josh executed on it for the first time. And I think the most hope that we've seen so far in his tenure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Dable, and honestly, all around, I thought the coaching staff did a good job of getting everybody prepared in all 3 phases of the game. I think the Bills dominated all 3 phases, and at every level. I thought the offensive line had a heck of a game. I know there's been a ton of questions there. A lot of those guys are getting a lot of flack for the hits on the quarterback, things like that, lack of running game. I felt like they made a great effort out there today. I thought they gave Josh everything he needed to succeed. So that all comes back to coaching for me. One thing that we saw a little bit on Twitter and even, throughout Slack and things like that, and I want to get your opinion on this, is because I thought they did a really good job coaching of playing with the lead. They came out in the second half. Defense was still had their ears pinned back, was still playing aggressive. I thought that they played fairly aggressive. They toned it down a little coming out of the half, but they played fairly aggressive into the second half and they really ate up about that whole third quarter before they dialed it back a ton and just kind of played to win. I know Bills fans have been burned in the past by guys like Marone and Rex Ryan of that play to win mentality when you have a 17-point lead or whatever. I thought the coaching staff did a really good job of knowing when to kind of pull back and let the clock be the dagger versus trying to do too much, get scores, possibly turn the ball over, put yourself in vulnerable positions. What was your thought on how Dable played the pace of the game and how the game was playing out?
I thought it was fantastic in, like you said, tempering and gauging when to be able to push, when to be able to dial it back. I thought that one of the I'll give the best example I can come up with was it was late in the second quarter. Bills are up 24-0. They're driving and they start to hit a couple snags. We got a series of penalties all in a row. We got down to like their 35 or so, and then all of a sudden get a penalty, then another penalty. We're back there. It's 3rd and 20 at their 44. And in a lot of other times, I think in many cases in the past, we would have seen that be 3 or 4 wide, inside handoff on a draw for no gain, and then we would have punted it. We would have sat there at the 42, and everybody would have been upset because we would have punted into their territory. The fact that Dable had the confidence to not only call a pass play on 3rd and 20 where you're not going to pick it up, but put him in a position to get critical yards, that they threw an 8-yard pass to Kelvin Benjamin where they know the defense is off. And now that's the difference from the 42 going down to the 34, that with Hauschka, that's easy field goal territory. That right there was a 3-point pass. He got us points on the board, making that read, making that pass, and being able to do that. And we have seen that for years, that is a give up moment for the Bills. We have simply thrown that away and packed it in. and then all of a sudden be ready for the next play and try to punt it down and play defense. And having the confidence in a rookie quarterback against a fantastic defense to let him air it out there, along with some other areas in the third quarter and fourth quarter. There were obviously not nearly as many passes, but they stayed aggressive. They kept pushing it. And I think until really that drive with 7-8 minutes left was when they really took the air out of it and were just handing it off. I think up until that point, all through the third quarter and the early beginning of the fourth quarter, there was still legitimate drives, legitimate game planning, and they kept and stayed aggressive. And we've seen in the past where the entire second half, the moment they got up 17-0, that would have been taking the air out of the ball and start handing it off. And they didn't do that. And I think that speaks to a domino effect of McDermott's confidence in Dable and Dable's confidence in Allen to already be to that point.
Yeah, and I think some of that for Dable comes from winning organizations. I think you pick that kind of stuff up. This is how you win games, right? You got to put a team away. You can't let anyone in the NFL. I know I was nervous if they were going to go into the halftime with a 24-point lead. Even the 27-point lead, I still had nerves being a Bills fan. So you still have to build those points when you can get them. And it's even as good as the Bills were playing, a lot of their field position came from turnovers, things like that. So when you have the opportunity to be in field position and try to get those easy points, and you know that, like you said, the defense is going to be in that off coverage, you have to try to get those, whatever it is, 6 to 8 yards. You're probably going to be able to get it, so you have to try it. Worst case scenario, it's an incompletion, right? You misfire and you're still where you would have been anyways. So I thought that was great football. I agree with you. I thought there was one play, I think it was a Marcus Murphy run. He got it into a 3rd and 1 situation, I believe, and it got pulled back on a holding call from Mills. And I felt like right there, they were in Minnesota field position. They're on their territory. I felt like when that play pulled them back a little bit, that's when Dable kind of was like, you know what? Like, I think if they would have gotten that first down, they would have continued to be aggressive and try to get some more points on the board there. It got pulled back, and I felt like at that point, Dable said, you know what, let's just get this, our defense is playing well. Let's just get out of here tonight, park the car in the garage and call it a day. And I was totally fine with it at that point. I know fans wanted to see them really put their foot on the gas and do what the Patriots do and light up a scoreboard for 40-something points. But to me, a win's a win. I would have liked the shutout. It's fine that they put points up. The Bills got out of here with a dominating victory against a very good team. So I was really impressed with Dable. Who else on offense stood out to you? Because obviously the receivers, there was a lot going around to anybody, to different people. I thought maybe Holmes had a decent game. He had some nice catches. Clay had some good catches. Obviously Kroom with the big one catch for a touchdown. Good to see him get in there. But nobody really outside of Allen really stood out to me. I thought it was just kind of a group effort across the board. How did you feel?
It's funny you say that. I actually struggled with that. I was looking for, okay, maybe, in hockey, you do your 3 stars, and where was that coming? Yeah. I was trying to find that on offense and defense. And on offense, it was kind of tough. I know we had a couple comments in the chat box about Andre Holmes. Honestly, probably right up there. He had a couple of really tough plays in some big spots. The line as a whole, it's hard not to really give them credit as a whole, because it's easy for, if any one of them fails, it makes it look like everybody's bad. So the fact that, I think they came away with 1 sack, maybe 2, maybe a couple later on, they ended up getting 2 or 3, but for when the game was competitive, it was maybe 1 legitimate pressure. So being able to open up some opportunity there. Obviously we weren't churning out major yards on offense, so there wasn't huge lanes, but there was productive runs. So I know it's kind of weird when you look, in the long run of the day was 7 from Ivory, 7 from Murphy, 10 from Allen. That seems like, oh, that must have been terrible. But I know I saw a lot of comments about, man, every single first down was 3 or 4 yards. And then again, we were in a lot of 2nd and 6, 2nd and 7, and that's critical for a guy like Allen, not to put him behind the sticks, not to put him in those situations. So I think the fact that we didn't have a ton of superstar plays, I know Cliff was talking about it in the chat here about how I saw a lot of comments about, oh man, the Vikings gave this game away, or and that's fine. Like we're an underdog for a reason. If we were going to pull this off, you were going to need some amazing fortune to go your way. And yes, we cashed in on 2 fortunate fumbles, but that's football. Those things happen. Like, there's no need to apologize for that. We don't need to feel bad.
On the cashing in thing, I know as a Bills fan, there's been years of Bills getting turnovers and not being able to cash in on those. So that just because you get the turnover doesn't mean it's automatic points. Being able to cash in is kudos to the offense and putting themselves in a position to cash in. So I don't think you can take that away from the Bills.
Yeah. I mean, so it is what it is. I don't. There's no need to get frustrated or defensive about it. That no, man, we whip them from start to finish. We're like, no, we got some good bounces. We got some really fortunate penalties early on. We got some really fortunate fumble bounces going the right way. We had an interceptable pass or two that they didn't get, but we also didn't win by 3 points like that. They took advantage of every opportunity that was there, drove it home. On the offensive side, I'd honestly say Allen, obviously by far, was the MVP, and that's not any wishful thinking. That he was the best player on offense today. And then it was kind of deceiving, but it's probably Chris Ivory. The couple passes that he got and the way that he kept churning it out, that he had a lot of ugly 2-yard runs that could have been losses. He had a lot of ugly 3-yard runs that converted first downs. So even though 56 yards from 20 carries looks terrible, 2.8's an ugly number, but the fact that he got it to the key runs when we needed it and kept them honest where they couldn't be able to completely disregard the run, that was needed. And against a team like Minnesota, where you're not going to put up superstar flashy stats, he kept the offense on time and kept the chains moving, which is what we needed.
No, absolutely. And I think you bring up a great point about Ivory. And it's nice to see that. Obviously, Shady McCoy, I don't think today you can say they were better because Shady wasn't in there. Obviously, I think they would have been even better if Shady was in there. But the fact that with Shady hurt and he is an older back, obviously Ivory's also an older back, but to be able to see him handle 24 touches in a game is a nice thing to see, that you have a backup running back that can come in and take 24 touches a week or two here and there when he needs to, but he can also go back to a role of taking 6 to 10 touches a game and still have some production at that level. I think that's something that the Bills haven't had in the past couple of years. Tolbert couldn't come in and take 24 touches and give you the production, obviously, that Ivory did. I think we all were pretty high on Marcus Murphy going into the season. I think he's clearly over the past couple of weeks shown that he's a third running back on this team. I think Ivory's clearly the second running back on this team. And that might just be a case of maturity in the league, understanding the league a little bit better. Murphy's probably got to get a little bit more of that under his belt before he gets that. But I think that's one of the most encouraging things to take away from the offense is I think Shady will be back. I think he'll be fine. I think he'll get his production throughout the year. But knowing that you have that guy behind him so that if he rolls up an ankle or if he needs a break, that you have a guy that he might not be hitting big home run plays, but he can be at least productive enough to keep your offense moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. I mean, LaShawn McCoy is not the guy that you want to be your sledgehammer. Like, you don't want him to be, hey, it's 3rd and 1. We need the 2 yards, go and pick it up here. You don't want to ram him into the defense over and over again. Ivory's perfect for that. He's a legitimate short yardage, hard-nosed running back that ideally, I'd love to have a game late in the year where Shady has a great game and things are going well, and then we give 12 carries to Ivory in the 4th quarter just to wear them down and let them go. Like some Derrick Henry type stuff from last year. Mm-hmm. So he has a role. He fits in. I think that Murphy is kind of a hybrid kind of guy, that he can be a returner. He can be there as your 3rd down scat back. That little flip play, I think, could have been nifty if he had got it and kept going. There was actually some space over there on the right if he catches that clean. So, I mean, they each play their role, and I honestly think as a 3 running back set for what we have they actually, I think, set up very well.
Yeah. And I did think if they were going to have any chance in this game, it was going to start with the run game. And I do think I always chalk up a lot of those swing passes. I know it's a pass and it's part of the passing game, but to me in the modern NFL, that's an extension of the run game. That's the new toss play. And all year long, they've been getting easy yards on that. And I wasn't sure if Ivory was going to be able to do that, but he handled that fantastic. I thought he took some of those swing passes and picked up just nice chunks of yards. That's been a real... that's been free yards for the Bills so far this year, those swing passes, something that we haven't seen from a quarterback and a running back. Tyrod had trouble getting those swing passes out there to a guy running in rhythm so they could pick up those yards. So free stuff like that's fantastic. Once that, as I'm looking at this, when I was watching the game, I thought that this stat was going to look a lot different at the end of the game, because the thing I thought the Bills did the best, especially in the first half, I do think this stat's particularly inflated from the way the second half played out. But I thought the Bills did a phenomenal job on third down in the first half, especially, and their defense did a really good job throughout the game. McDermott's preached that's where the game's won. You got to win on third downs on both sides of the ball. But at the end of the day, it looks right here, I'm seeing the Bills were on offense 4 for 13, 31% conversion rate on third down. I thought that number was going to be higher when I saw it. I'm guessing a lot of that came in the second half when they were just running the clock out, and that's when you started punting the ball a little bit more. But even on defense, 5 for 14 for 36% conversion rate. I felt like those numbers seem maybe inflated to the way the second half went, because I felt they did a great job on third down. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I haven't played around to find the splits and to see how much of that was first half versus second half. I have a feeling that was probably more like 3 of 6 in the first half, and then probably 1 of 7 in the second half. It was around that ballpark. There were also, I know a lot of people laugh about Mike Lombardi, but one of the things he talks about is playing CFL football and not getting to third down. Like, you just get your first downs on first and second down. They were doing a lot of that. So there were a couple runs that we picked it up, but we had a lot of nice chunk plays that were moving the ball through that first half, converting quickly, not getting to where we needed to convert third down. So there was probably a mix of that too on some of those drives where it was just first down, score, and that it was helping avoid what that slow dink and dunk can be there. But I think, like you said, we set it up well. They were able to go through there on the swing passes to Ivory, the guy that a friend of mine that I was watching it with. We were talking about, can you imagine being a 190-pound cornerback and seeing Chris Ivory coming at you with a head of steam in the open field? That's just got to be terrifying. That is an angry man.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to tackle him in any situation, let alone just me by myself on an island, an open field. And he's outweighs you by 50 to 80 pounds, and he's just going to barrel down through you. Yeah, not an ideal scenario for anybody. Definitely is a hard runner. But and to your point of what Lombardi brings up with the CFL and playing on those downs, another thing that's going to skew those stats and pad the stats for the Bills was a lot of the big plays that they got weren't on third downs, right? They were getting in and Cousins really early. So we talked about the offense a lot. I do want to get into the defense, and we usually do not talk about special teams that much. I just saw you post in the chat there. I think we got to talk about special teams. You don't win a game against a Super Bowl contending team, at least universally thought so, in a hostile environment, unless all 3 phases of the game are playing well. And I thought you saw it today. Obviously, we didn't really punt much in the first half, but when they did punt, they were valuable. I mean, they flipped field position, I think, twice on the Vikings. There was a couple times where the Vikings got a little bit of field position back. It looked like they were gaining on it, and then the Bills turned around and flipped it right back on them. And that ability, when you have the lead, to flip back field position is more vital, I think, than the average fan knows.
Oh yeah, well, I'm a huge fan of Corey Bojorquez. The fact, just the fact that we stole him from Belichick just warms my heart. Being able to go through and see what he did today: 6 punts, 5 of them inside the 20, 4 of them inside the 10. He didn't have the space that he did the last couple of weeks. He averaged 50 yards a punt the first week and had a lot of bombs. We had a lot this week that were closer to the 50 where he couldn't get that cushion yardage there. So he still averaged 43, 44. But the fact that every single time he pinned them down inside. That McD and Crossman were hammering the team about not letting it bounce into the end zone. We had multiple that were covered right there. So I think Corey Bojorquez was a huge part. I had pages of notes here and a very disproportionately odd amount about a punter, which is weird. So just constantly flashing over and over again. The biggest one there, really critical at the end. 7 minutes left. We start to run it. That's really where you started to see the kind of conservative. You saw some people in the Slack a little concerned that, hey, we took the air out of the ball. There were times where we could have passed it, but they wanted to keep the clock running. They got us in a position where we didn't get barely any yards. We're still back at like the 30. He uncorks a 59-yard punt with 7 minutes left that gets down to the 8 and just put them constantly in bad position. So I thought that Bojorquez was fantastic. Hauschka made his kicks. We had a great overall game. I think even one of Hauschka's was 50, which is crazy that he's so automatic and assumed that we don't even we're not even impressed that he hit a 50-yard kick because he just makes it every time. So with the misses going on around the NFL, he's a huge luxury. But yeah, I thought special teams was great today. No, they didn't score, so we didn't have a ton of opportunity for returns. I'd say, like you said, not wanting to be all rose-colored here. The miss on the fair catch by Ray was huge. We had a chance. I think he was thrown off a little bit that it was such a terrible punt by Minnesota's punter that it was probably 15, 20 yards short of where he thought it was going to be. So he started to run up, saw it was coming down too soon, backed away, probably thought he could snag it on the bounce. And then from that point, it got a 32-yard bounce. So it went from what would have been a 38-yard punt to a 70-yard punt, because he let it bounce. And honestly, I know they took him out for the next couple and put Hyde in there, but I was actually glad to see the confidence in him that they got him back out there. They gave him another chance to return a couple, build him back up. But that's a rough one. That's a huge, that was the only, I think you might've made the comment. That was the only time that they let Minnesota really flip fields and take back field position.
Yeah, and that's the type of spot in a game that you're dominating. You really don't want to see anybody flip field position on you. I do think, obviously, they took him out with just cause to take him out. I thought that's a tough spot for a rookie. If you go back and watch a couple of the first punts, those bounces that the punter was getting were favorable to Buffalo. The ball was not bouncing in favor of Minnesota because they let a few drop and hit the ground. So I don't know why he didn't decide to catch that one. I don't know what was going on in his head at the time. But when I saw it bounce, I figured, all right, it'll, take maybe a 10-yard bounce out of bounds. I did not expect it to bounce on a line 32 yards behind him. Kind of a rough thing, but definitely he's got to learn from that. So yeah, definitely the one problem on special teams I would say is that we talked about the punter. One thing before we get into the defense, I'm a big fan. Obviously, everybody on the show knows I love to mention Taiwan Jones. Didn't even think he played today. I didn't think he'd be able to get a helmet on his head, man, with that welt that he had. But you saw him. You saw a couple of guys. It takes that whole unit to get down there and field those punts. Obviously, the punter gave him enough time to get down there and do that, but we've seen for years Bill's special teams units where the punter pins it within that 5 yard and the ball just bounces over some guy's head that just can't get it. It takes a lot to be a gunner and get down there and do that. So I thought that whole unit played well today as a unit. I know Danny Crossman gets a ton of grief for all the penalties that the Bills get on special teams and all that stuff, but they played clean football and they played good football, and I thought that contributed a lot to the win, especially at the end of the game where you're just trying to keep them pinned back in their own field position and not allow them to get anything going. And then that set up the defense, who I thought was the bee's knees today, man. I think we weren't really sure what to expect from this defense. Obviously, you saw that second half of football. I think you had mentioned it in the Slack channel now. That's 6 quarters of football that we've seen out of them. That's real good. We saw 6 bad quarters. Now we've seen 6 good quarters. Hopefully the trend continues on the ladder on this, the last 6. But man, it was a totally different team. It was the defense we saw in the second half of the game last week. They continued that over against a really good offense. I know a lot of mistakes were made, penalties were made, things like that. But this defense, I thought, imposed their will across the board, even against the talented players.
Absolutely. It's crazy to think that the Minnesota Vikings coming into today, I'm a big gambling and fantasy and daily fantasy player. I know a lot of people who had an awful lot of investment in Latavius Murray having a big game today. The Minnesota Vikings ran the ball 6 times. Latavius Murray had 2 carries. 2. It's unbelievable that they were in a position where they ran the ball 6 times. Yeah. Kirk Cousins passed the ball 55 times and honestly was 40 of 55. Like, he actually had a reasonably efficient game. I think it felt like Adam Thielen had 35 catches. Yeah, 14. He had 14 catches for 105 yards, but every single one was in front of someone, and they played their perfect cover 2 defense, zone. They mixed in the man when they needed to. They didn't leave anyone out on an island. You had Ryan Lewis playing a fantastic game. That defense was fantastic. It was everything we could have asked for.
Yeah, and the aggression that they played with. I think one thing that I don't know because I haven't played the game back, but just from that first observation of how they were playing, I thought the first, you had mentioned it, the first 6 quarters, it looked like I'm not the kind of guy that can sit and watch a game and spot what a defense is doing and be like, oh, no, they're in cover 3 or they're in, this is what they're doing. They're in quarters coverage. But I felt like watching the Bills, the first 6 quarters, the first 2 games, they just didn't have any disguise of what they were doing. They weren't bringing any pressure. They weren't really doing anything to disrupt veteran quarterbacks that they were playing up against. And I thought that this week, second half last week, but this week specifically, you saw a lot of that on third downs. We started to see everybody up on the line. And when you do that, you're not really sure who's dropping, who's coming. I thought that created confusion. Obviously, Jerry Hughes, I don't even know if Reef was able to touch him throughout the game. I think he tried to get his hands on him a few times, but Hughes was just going around him. I don't even think he used all that many moves on Reef. He just beat him off the ball and went around the guy 9 times out of 10. He only ended up with the 1 sack, but I mean, Jerry Hughes was all over Kirk Cousins and in that backfield and just creating disruption. And it led to the other guys getting sacks. I think everybody needs to take Jerry Hughes out for dinner on that defense because he is the one that allowed everybody to eat today.
We were joking. It had to feel like Kirk Cousins just had a picture of Jerry Hughes in his peripheral at all times because it couldn't have seemed real that he was there every single play. Stefan brought it up here. I do think that, honestly, those 2 early strip sack fumbles were really in Cousins' head. I think it caused him to speed up his internal clock. I think he was constantly worried. And then to reinforce that, you had Starr had a couple plays where he collapsed the pocket early on, which we hadn't seen. Trent Murphy was great. He gets, I think he has kind of a high expectation because of the contract and then not seeing him in the preseason. He was excellent today, consistently making pressure, had a couple nice combo moves, spinning back inside. I saw a couple where he had a jab step outside and cut back in, had a couple really nice moves there. And like you said, Jerry was literally in the backfield every single play. So it's so funny. Sometimes you see where stats can be misleading or you have empty tackles and things like that. This is the most misleading box score ever. Jerry Hughes, 1 tackle, 1 solo tackle, 1 sack. That's technically the only statistic that he recorded today. He was, I think, our best defender. I'm sure Trey was awesome because no one ever went at him. But for what you could see on film or on the broadcast until we see the film, Jerry was fantastic and was constantly pressuring the quarterback. I can't wait to see his total pressures number of what he was able to get out there. But he was a disruptive force, just terrifying them every single play.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. In my notes for the game, in the third quarter at some point, I just wrote down Jerry Hughes and underlined it 3 times because I thought, hands down, even as good as Josh Allen played, I thought Jerry Hughes was the player of the game all around, not just on the defensive side of the ball. And this is something I've been saying for years because he got a lot of flack over the offseason about not putting up double-digit sacks or whatever it is. And I keep telling people, a guy like Jerry Hughes doesn't always need to get double-digit sacks in a season to be productive. I think his production is his ability to get back there and disrupt. There's multiple ways to create pressure on a quarterback, and it doesn't have to just be sacks. What he needed was guys like Trent Murphy with high motors, guys, Kyle Williams and a Starr who doesn't allow. You saw last year, Jerry Hughes gets pressure. He comes around the edge. Quarterback just steps up to a wide open field, 10, 15 yards. Nobody's there. And Jerry can't do it all by himself. So now he's got some guys that have this high motor with him where, he collapses the pocket, gets in Kirk Cousins' head, like they were saying. And then you get Trent Murphy coming around beating his guy too. And that's how sacks end up multiplying. You end up with 4 sacks, 2 strip sacks, a couple fumbles, things like that. All that plays off each other. So don't look at, when you're looking at a guy like Jerry Hughes, you can't look at a box score and say, well, Jerry Hughes isn't out there doing anything, because he is out there doing anything. Like you said, I'm really interested to see his pressure statistics out there. I don't usually love the individual grades or things like that, but I definitely want to see this, what that looks like this week.
Oh yeah. I mean, being able to see how everything shook out, like I said, it was the game plan seemed so solid. There were so few actual threats. Diggs had 1 play where he went deep, where I think he could have made a spectacular catch, maybe for a touchdown. There was a couple other plays that were threatened here and there, but realistically, everything was controlled by the Bills and the game plan. And I'll get to this. One of the huge points I had, which I am overly positive about Sean McDermott. I believe very strongly in a lot of the chemistry and culture and elements of what he does. And I think today was an unbelievable example. He knew that last week how much attention came on him taking over the play calls at halftime, what that could have potentially done. He was very cautious not to make a big deal about it, to say that he was going to remain engaged, but that, Leslie Frazier is an incredibly valued member of the team and a big part of it. All of us, me included, assumed that it was purely coach speak and that he was taking over the calls and that he was trying to protect what Leslie Frazier meant and his relationship, to then find out after the game that not only did Leslie Frazier make the calls, but that he gave Leslie Frazier the game ball, and you saw the entire team go nuts about what they knew that meant for him. I think that kind of feeling of what he helps to build and how that's able to just kind of breathe throughout the locker room and throughout the team, that the reason that people buy in, the same comment I made earlier about what Josh Allen's hurdle play over Anthony Barr does for the rest of the team. When McDermott sees that, and everybody knew the potential of how that could have gone badly, and to see him not only put that trust back in there, help support him to make him look good, and then to give Leslie Frazier the game ball, that's amazing. And that's what a real leader does. Is he didn't go for any of the credit. He didn't go for any of the bravado of saying, no, hey, sorry, I'm better at this. This is what we got to do. He put him in a great position, helped him look good, and then gave him the credit afterwards. That's what a real leader does.
A little bit anti-Rex Ryan, if you will, from the previous regime that we saw, really, though. And I picked up on that, too, when I saw that. I looked over at my wife, and I had goosebumps. I said, that is the type of leadership that you need, especially – let's not get ahead of ourselves. This was a big win, and I still think they're a 4 to 6 win team. I'm still where I was before. Obviously, they get this free win here, but when you are looking at a roster that might not have the most talent in the league, and you're going to have some ups and downs in a season, the best thing that you can hope for is to have a leader like Sean McDermott there to keep the ship steady, and that's what he does. And I know people from media to fans get super frustrated with the press conferences and the coach speak and all that stuff, but we've talked about on the show, you just mentioned it, I think more times than not, people chalk up what they perceive as coach speak. I think he's telling the truth, and I think he really means what he says, and it just sounds like coach speak, but he is just that kind of guy, and he lives by that. And so I think people need to start taking what he says a little bit more seriously in the press conferences and realize that he's not just feeding you lines or anything like that. When he says he has to watch the tape, I think he legitimately wants to not make rash decisions and go back and watch everything and get all the details he can before making decisions. When he says, isn't willing to throw Leslie Frazier on the bus, I think that's sincere. I think he has a high amount of respect for all of his coaches on his staff, and he's not just going to throw some guy under the bus in public. He's going to build them up behind closed doors, and you saw them reap the benefits of that this week. I'm all on the process. I get ripped on Twitter all the time for being a homer, but I don't think the process always shows up every single Sunday. I think you have to take the whole picture of what he's building on this team. And Tony Romo talked about it a few times too, that he's building this thing the right way. Whether or not the results are going to be instant, that's another thing, but he's doing it the right way.
That's a great point you brought up. Almost every time you hear the announcing team comment on their meetings with McDermott, they all walk away impressed. They all make comments like, man, they got the right guy here in Buffalo. This guy's the real deal. Or, hey, I get why the team follows behind this guy. And that consistent chorus doesn't come from nowhere. Like that means something when you hear every single guy bringing that up. So getting back to some of the specifics on defense, obviously the flash plays, Matt Milano was unbelievable. Now, granted, it was, I think my comment in the Slack for Milano was he's laying there and God says, Matt, would you like an interception? He's like, God, I'm already on my back. Don't worry, I got it. He's sitting there and it literally drops right into his belly. But that the blitz pickup, where the blitz that resulted in the sack, there was a running back there technically in between him and the quarterback. He mowed down the running back trying to do a blitz pickup and got a sack. On the best rush I remember seeing from him was Johnny on the spot to pick up that fumble that was caused. Just maybe not all the plays that were there and racking up amazing tackles, but having the flash plays there. I take that back. He still had 8 tackles. Just an unbelievable game from him. And then For Edmonds, I'd say maybe the opposite. I think he was really steady today. He didn't get isolated and put in a bad spot. He had a lot of tackles. He had 10 tackles overall. Didn't have maybe the huge flash plays, although I think that a lot of people would say he caused the interception.
I was going to say his hit led to the interception, and that was a great hit.
Yeah, being able to be in the right spot. But again, the opposite of last week, what I was concerned about, where he got put on an island and kind of exposed. Very steady today, in the right positions, and just a great overall game.
Yeah, when you mentioned Tremaine Edmonds, though, I do think that he has that similar trait to Josh Allen that has me less worried about his development progression over time. I wasn't sure that he would be able to take what happened last week and transfer it into a game with a quick round, because we talk about it a lot in the Slack channel. I don't think progression is a linear, development's a linear thing. But with Edmonds, and they talked about it in the preseason, and talked about it all throughout his development, he's a super mature kid, and he really takes to the teaching that he's being given. So, and you could see that in the results of this week. I don't think I ever saw him out of position or said, oh, wow, they're really picking on him. Part of that was the defense as a whole was playing well. The offense couldn't get into a rhythm. But I also think that part of that was his teaching and his mental, being able to prepare and be mentally tough and not letting a bad game get to him and overemphasizing what happened the week before. I think you see that a lot of times with these young players, and they can spiral out of control a little bit. We saw it with Kiko Alonso here. He started to have a couple bad plays where he's over pursuing when he played here. And then before you know it, at the end of the season, he's not the legend of Kiko that everybody thinks he is. It gets into these guys' heads. I don't think we're going to have that issue with Edmonds or Josh Allen. I think they did a good job of getting guys that are mentally tough. One thing that I think I'm most interested to see from Eric and people once we start seeing the all 22, because you can't see it on the broadcast view, is the first two games I was not very happy with the way Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde played. I had high expectations for them after their season last year. They did not come out this preseason have very good football that they were playing, and I didn't see great stuff in the first two games. I really think once we watch that all 22, a lot of the stuff that happened and that the defense was able to do, I think you're going to see really strong play from Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, and even Trey, who we expect it from now, of really keeping things in front of the defense downfield and not letting those things, anybody take the top off of us.
Oh, absolutely. I think that their communication was fantastic today, how they were able to move things back and forth, incorporating someone like Ryan Lewis, who played a ton of snaps, some in and out from Taron Johnson. I was really happy with Taron Johnson today, but I have a feeling in the pit of my stomach that I don't know how his availability is going to be long-term. It seems like that might be a recurring thing, but just isn't, to his own detriment, isn't afraid to stick his nose in there and make a big hit. Seems like he's kind of hurt himself a couple times doing that, but we'll see where that goes. But I agree, incorporating what they weren't sure of what was going to happen there, a fair amount of snaps from Lafayette Pitts, a lot of snaps from Ryan Lewis, being able to go and keep all that together. I credit a ton of that to Poyer and to Hyde, probably Hyde more specifically, to be able to keep that going. And as I had said on one of our other sessions, they were able to leave Trey out there on an island. He held Stephon Diggs to 4 catches on 10 targets. He had 17 receiving yards. It was his least receiving yards in almost 2 years. The same idea when he shadowed Keenan Allen. Trey White is not going to show up in the box score. He didn't really. He had 4 tackles, which was actually a little more than what you expect. But he's going to start to get, and I made the comment in the chat, not that I'm comparing him to Deion Sanders, but he's going to start to have those Deion-type box scores where him not showing up and just never throwing his way is that respect. That is what he's going to start having, where it's not going to be, oh, we're going to test him and he's going to get 6, 7, 8, 9 interceptions. It's going to be he has 1 interception because no one ever throws it his way.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great problem right now for this Bills defense to almost essentially cut the field in half. He has that ability. I think he's maybe the best player on the team. Obviously, Shady is the most explosive player still. But I think right now, league-wide, there's clearly a huge amount of respect for his game from offensive coordinators and quarterbacks. When they're watching film, they're watching Tre'Davious White, and they're saying, we're not going to test this guy.
Yeah, no, I think that, being able to put people in a position like that and having what Trey does and what that allows you to do with Taron Johnson, that allows you to start Ryan Lewis, a guy that was on the practice squad, his first active status, and he's all of a sudden starting in his first game in the NFL. I think it's really important. A point you touched on earlier with both Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmonds. I think Tremaine, both of them had comments you saw even in training camp where, hey, you saw Allen got picked off, but the first thing he did afterwards wasn't get frustrated. He went and asked Micah Hyde, hey, how did you do that? Shady toasted Tremaine Edmonds, and he wasn't frustrated. He went and talked to Shady like, hey, what was I doing? Was I over pursuing, assuming where you were going to go? So I actually think even a step further than the fact of what you said about it not getting down on Tremaine in a game like that, I actually think it's healthy and great for him. I actually think getting some of that humble pie earlier on, some of those hard lessons learned, I actually think a guy like him, his temperament, his mindset, his mental toughness is going to be better for him long term to get those things and to learn those things now, and to be able to put him in a position to not make that mistake again, not make that second mistake. So I actually like the makeup and the mental toughness of the rookies that we have. Taron Johnson showing the same thing, getting toasted here or there and being able to come back and learn from that. I think the fact that they're trying to find those kind of guys really speaks to the kind of team they're trying to build and how they're able to do that. So I know a couple guys have made comments. Casey was commenting, if this is the only win we get all year, I'll be satisfied. That's not far off. And I agree with what you had said about this doesn't all of a sudden mean we're probably back in a playoff hunt. I'd love to be wrong, but that's probably not what we've got here as a team. But I hope this does show people this is not going to be a team that's going to tuck their tail and just take beatings every week. We are going to win more games. There's some games later in the schedule that are very doable. We're probably going to surprise another team or two. So we also might need to be prepared that maybe we're not in for the number 1 overall pick. I know I saw Jonathan talk about Nick Bosa. I'd love to have that problem. I have a feeling that there's a couple other teams that might struggle a little bit more, but I hope this reassures people that it's a competitive team that's going to fight every week and is going to put ourselves in position to win when the opportunities are there. And we're probably going to take a couple beatings as well that are frustrating and disappointing. But today certainly was reinvigorating as a fan.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think a lot of people thought just because of the first 2 weeks, 0-16 was in the playbooks. It never got to that point. I thought when you watched it back, I watched the games back again last night just because I'm a glutton for punishment. I was watching those games back again, and I really, when I'm watching them, I saw a lot of plays left on the field, a lot of opportunities to get into those games that were left on the field. And I just kind of chalked it up to, this is a young team with a lot of new parts at major pieces. And I kind of just chalked it up to that. And I said, you know what? The one thing that I saw was this team never gave up at any point in any of those games. And if you have that on your team when you're getting blown out and your team's still fighting for you, you're going to be in some games in the NFL at some point. Teams are either going to sleep on you or you're really going to come out and surprise some people, get the calls to go your way, get the balls to bounce your way. And that's really all it takes in the NFL. I talk about it all the time, 4 to 6 plays to either bounce your way or get those big, important calls, and you're really going to be in any game. One thing I wanted to touch on that you talked about, you talked about the rookies. We both talked about their mental composure. I think Bean right now, Bean and McDermott get a lot of flack, whether it's on Twitter and chat rooms or stuff like that, about their ability to evaluate talent because people aren't seeing talent in the positions that they think that this team should have addressed. I don't think that that's a fair assessment, only because the talent that they have brought in outside of, say, Nathan Peterman is maybe the one that McDermott brought in that the talent doesn't appear to be there at all. I think that they've done a good job not only finding talented players, but the right mental makeup. We talked about Josh Allen, we talked about Tremaine Edmonds. You saw it from Matt Milano last year. Matt Milano has made a lot of big plays. He's also made a lot of mistakes. And he seems to continue to bounce back from those mistakes and continue to make good plays. You see it with Trey White, that game against the Bengals last year. He got toasted. And I love the way he bounced back there, and he continued to build upon that throughout the year. So if they continue to find those guys that fit the mental aspect of what they're going for on top of the athletic ability and the ability to play the game, I think you start to really build a really nice core. They have 10 picks next year. If you hit on 4 of those and you add 4 players that are, Taron Johnson type guys, that's a good way to build a team. I think they get a bad knock for evaluating guys, but I think they're finding the right guys for them.
Yeah, I think it's tough. Anytime I always talk about taking your medicine, and this 2018 is going to be a lot about taking our medicine. And the biggest chunk of that is $55 million in dead cap. We had a lot of bad contracts to get out of. You can argue about whether that was the right way to do it and spread it out or do it all at once, but this is what we're doing. $55 million is 7, 8, maybe 10 contributing NFL roster players. So that's a bunch of gaps where, Robert Foster's probably not on this team. Lafayette Pitts is probably not on this team. Deion Lacey's probably not on this team. Connor McDermott, all those guys, those are probably filled by $5, $6, $8 million players that we're going to have that opportunity next year. Now, they still have to follow through on that. They still have to show us that they're able to go out and do that. I think that a lot of people, I think you and I both wanted us to probably lock up Kelvin Benjamin earlier on. And now in my mind, he's showing his true colors that if we're not getting full 100% effort in his contract year, I want nothing to do with re-signing him. So I'm fine that he plays out the year. I don't necessarily think we need to trade him or anything like that, but I'm fine if he just plays out the year and goes on his way. I would rather know that ahead of time and not invest in a player like that. But I do have some confidence that, people were giving Starr a hard time and Trent Murphy a hard time, that it wasn't these huge, monstrous flash plays. They both were huge contributors today. They are exactly the kind of dead cap I'm reading the comments in the chat box, the kind of money that we want to spend for the culture and what we have in the locker room, that you want guys. That Trent Murphy is a famous workaholic in his workout habits, that Star Latulippe is known for his team effort and the
unselfishness
of what's there. So those are the reasons that we spent there. And that, you can argue, I know people bring up Don Terry Poe and stuff like that. Like, he got 9.5 million and Star got 10 million. I'm okay with that if we got the right guy in the locker room. It wasn't like there were other guys of that caliber going for $1 million. Like, that's what those guys cost, and we paid it, and we're bringing in the right people.
Yeah, and I think it is about the right people. And you brought up a great point of being able to build in the future, all that money once it's freed up, and if you continue to find the right guys. So yeah, my point is that I think they're fine Italian talent evaluators, but it's not just talent. And he talked about it in the Embedded series. It's talent plus habits. And being able to find those guys, I think, is even harder than being able to just look on tape and find the athletes and find the guys that produce well. It's being able to pinpoint, all right, this guy's a good fit for what we're trying to accomplish. Here to wrap it up today, obviously, this is a huge win for all Bills fans. We all deserve this, I think, having been punished for the first 2 weeks of the NFL season, talked about as a possible 0-16, we're the new Browns. All this just trash. Obviously, Vontae Davis leaves just to pile it on a little bit further, how bad this organization is. You come out, you punch the Super Bowl contending NFC team right in the mouth on the road. We're all jacked up, but we still got a lot of games left. We've got a really tough one against Green Bay Packers at Green Bay next week. Obviously, maybe not as good of a team top to bottom as they just played. Far superior quarterback than anything we've seen so far this year. I think Phillip Rivers is probably the best one we've seen so far, but Aaron Rodgers is on another level. I think he, in my opinion, over the last 2 to 3 years when healthy, is the best quarterback in the league. He alone can beat you. What should we expect? What are you expecting without having dug into the Packers much? Are we going to come out and play competitive football with them like we did against the Vikings, or are we going to look more like the team of the first 2 weeks?
It's probably recency bias. But like I said, we played 6 quarters of terrible football. We've now played 6 quarters of fantastic football. 6 quarters of, I believe, 41-9 football. So I'm going to have some faith that McDermott has gotten the right mix together. They've gotten the right tweaks done to get the elements going the right direction, that we're going to see competitive, tough football. We're going to be an underdog for a reason. We're going against Aaron Rodgers. I do not expect 6 points like we gave up today. I honestly don't expect them to win. I do expect much more competitive football than what we saw in those first 6 quarters, which was embarrassing and hard to watch as a fan. I do think that whatever it was that they needed to get to click and to be able to put together a little bit more of the right mindset and the right approach, probably the communication in the secondary, the communication on defense, the communication across the offensive line, I'd like to think that that is sustainable and transferable, that will lead to more competitive football, if not a series of wins being ripped off here. I don't expect that. But I do expect more competitive. And I think a lot of fans are now going to see the same 4 to 6 wins of what we've been seeing versus, oh my gosh, this is 0-16. We're the worst team in history.
Yeah, and I do expect, I mean, you're more of the gambler of the two of us, but I expect Vegas to start being a little bit more fair to the Bills. I'm sure they don't want to take the loss that they took today again. I think even though they're playing a good team, I think that you'll see this week coming out, the spread's going to be back in that more normal range for a team that's an average football team going up against a good football team. I still expect them to not be the favorite in many games going forward, but I think that they've gained a lot more respect back in the league. This is a very, go with what's trending league, whether it's the national media or fans or whatever. So I think Bills fans enjoy this week because there's going to be a lot of positivity that comes out about this team and how they came out and played. One thing that I haven't seen yet after the game, I unfortunately had to go mow my lawn and get some chores going. Have you seen anything, or anybody in the chat box seen anything about any of the injuries of the game? I know at one point Johnson went out, he came back in. Lewis went out for a little bit. I never saw him come back in, so I wasn't sure if he got back in. Trent Murphy at one point went out. Obviously, Bodine went out after getting the start. Have we gotten any updates on injuries?
I know I fished around a little bit beforehand. I saw some comments that made it seem like maybe there was nothing serious. But again, we have to get used to this the same way you're not going to hear anything in the press conferences from McDermott. We're never going to get a ton of transparency or clear information on injuries either. Anything that he sees as a potential competitive advantage, he's going to keep close to the best. So I don't think we're ever going to see a whole lot of that, short of it being a shady Kelvin Benjamin, Josh Allen level player that you're going to have your Rappaports and your Schefters digging around about. So you got a lot of information about shady here this week. With the caliber of the guys or the positions of the guys we're talking about, I'm going to guess we're not going to find out much until the injury reports come out Tuesday or Wednesday. I do want to throw a couple things out there. I mentioned earlier about I do have an affinity for gambling. Today, the Buffalo Bills set a couple records. They were the first team in NFL history to be favored by 2 touchdowns, or to be underdogs by 2 touchdowns, and then to win by more than a touchdown ever since Las Vegas has been doing lines on games. They were the second biggest straight up upset since Super Bowl III in Joe Namath, which was an 18-point line of the Baltimore Colts, with the Jets upsetting them. So the 16.5 to 17-point line that they were a straight up win was the largest regular season update in NFL history, or upset in NFL history, and the second biggest ever since Super Bowl III. So I agree. I think that you actually mentioned about Vegas taking a beating today. They actually made a haul. All of the money was on Minnesota. Everyone was betting on Minnesota, so they crushed people today because everyone that I actually saw, if anybody listens to The Ringer or any of their stuff, both Bill Simmons and his friend House had Minnesota minus 16.5 as their 1,000-unit lock of the century to put all of your money on. So there were people who got crushed today by the Bills. So just a lot of fun. I got a couple of people asking. So selfishly, please feel free to follow me on Twitter. It's at Greg Tompsett, GregTompsett. I love to follow back all Bills fans and have a lot of fun interacting. And looking forward to a lot of more fun future podcasts together with Cover One.
Yeah. So with that being said, I appreciate you coming on, man. We're really happy to have you as part of the team here on Cover One. We've been chatting with Greg for a long time. We've been going back and forth with him for quite a while, and really needed some help here on the podcast and reached out to him, and more than happy to come on and do it. And I think it's a great fit. We're really excited about adding you to the team. So like Greg said, he posted there in the chat, go follow him on Twitter because he's a good follow. He's got some good gifts. He's a funny guy, all that stuff. So definitely go give him a follow on Twitter. And as always, you can follow all the Cover One accounts. Just go to whatever the social media networks that you prefer are. Search Cover One. You'll find us. We're very findable. I'm not going to give you all the handles. You guys are all smart people out there. You can find us. Make sure you head over to cover1.net, bookmark it, throw it up, whatever you got to do. to make sure that you get our content all the time, because, as a fan first, but, I talk to Eric about this all the time. I'm a fan first, as much as I do the podcast and stuff for Cover One. Part of the reason I do this so that I can get in on what Cover One's doing and make sure that I'm up in front and getting all the information that these guys are putting out. Fernando's working hard, Rob's working hard, all those guys putting out content for you guys. So make sure you get over there, download the app, Android, iOS, make sure you get that. Wednesday, as always, we'll be bringing you a Packers podcast, getting you ready for that matchup. Follow Eric. If you don't have an athletic subscription, get over there and get an athletic subscription as well. Eric is putting out great content over there, breaking down previous games, getting ramped up for the next opponent. As always, we're going to keep giving you that type of content. So make sure you're getting on it. Follow us everywhere you're at. Come back, join us on Wednesday, because that's going to be a great talk. Nate Gary's been really locking down those matchup shows. We bring in a guest that is an analyst from the other team and really dive into that roster and what to expect, because it's impossible for us to all follow all 32 teams as closely as we follow the Bills. So we bring in somebody that knows exactly what that roster is going to look like and gives us, an unbiased, objective view of that and what the Bills can expect. So make sure you subscribe, like on YouTube, subscribe on iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us. We can't do it without you guys. We appreciate you guys all coming out and joining the chat. Very happy to have you guys here. So we'll catch you on the next one, and really just savor this victory, you guys. Just get it in your mouth, chew it around, and savor it for a week. I don't know when we're going to get another one like this, so just enjoy being a Bills fan for a week. And thanks for coming out, guys.